Good morning. Welcome to this year's partner event. Before I get started, I need to correct a minor detail because I live in that area. It's called Pankow. So the other room is called Pankow. And people from Pankow tend to get very upset if they are presented as living in Pankow.
I had a good start.
Anyway, so we're going to spend a few minutes on a couple of thoughts I have compiled. When I'm preparing for this, I'm always scared by the term keynote, and you think of the big ones that you probably all have seen here or there. I feel it's not going to be that big and revolutionary as some of the real keynotes, but I hope I'm going to be able to share a couple of interesting thoughts anyway. Can you hear me in the back? Is that okay? Good. So just to recap, last year I had a walk through history, so to speak, through the history of callas software and also axaio software. I won't repeat it this time. But last year we had the opportunity to have a toast on 20 years of callas software and 20 years of the made-to-print software from axaio and a few other bits. So that was last year. This year, something important happened at callas software. And if you have known the company for a while, you will know that there was one person who actually got the company started. And who used to be the owner and main managing director, you would call it CEO in the Anglo-Saxon world, and that's me. And I had important people around me. So two of these people around me have been extremely important. Callas would not have been possible without them during the last, I don't know exactly, 15 years or so. So you have Ulrich, our head of development, and you have Dietrich, so to speak, our head of business, to the degree I was not taking care of it myself. So they have been with the company for a very long time already. When did you join, Ulrich? 97, 98? 96? Okay. So, he doesn't look that old, right? And of course, there's more people. It's not just one or two managers doing the whole thing. There's actually work that needs to be done, and that very often tends to be done by a lot of other people. So that has been the situation at callas software for many years. It has worked out quite well, I believe. And this just changed this year. So we have a slightly different situation. These three people are still the same people, but the roles have changed that these people fill. So earlier this year, Ulrich and Dietrich became shareholders of callas software. And Ulrich has nominally been a managing director for a very long time, since 2000 actually. But Dietrich also became managing director in March this year. And I'm still nominally managing director myself, so we have 3 managing directors. But we reassigned responsibilities to quite a degree. Ulrich and Dietrich together have taken over a lot of the responsibilities that have been on my plate for most of the past. And as a team of 2 are in charge to make sure that the company runs smoothly. I have been and will continue to do so for a little bit more. I'm moving more to the background. I will not disappear, but I will become less visible, I guess. I will also stop working like 60 to 80 hours a week. So I'll probably get to more normal work-life balance. I'm not sure how far I will get, because I always, once I'm in the middle of an interesting problem or project, I tend to forget time, and then by the time I look at the watch again, it's late in the evening, and there you are again. Anyway, so I would describe my role in the coming years to focus more on strategic topics, on strategic projects. Some of them may be completely in the background, not at all visible to the outside world, maybe showing up in some development in the software, on the products in the medium term. In some cases I may be also active on the forefront and show up here and there, like I'm doing today. Ulrich and Dietrich will split the responsibilities between them in more or less obvious fashion. So Ulrich will be in charge of everything technical, technology, development, engineering, and so on. And Dietrich will be in charge, or has been in charge, for both of them, that is true. Dietrich is in charge of business. Make sure that the money comes in so that we can feed our engineers. And so I wanted to share this with you and to make you understand what is happening and what this might mean. So more often than not, for example, than in the past, if you want to get in touch with the person at Callas Software, you may not be able to get in touch with me, you will rather get in touch with Dietrich. And all of this has not happened overnight, so it's a process that has already been going on for about 1.5 years. So we have carefully discussed how we should go about this, how to set up everything so that it can run smoothly, and you will also be able to understand that you can't just overnight reassign responsibilities and expect it to work smoothly. So we have been transitioning essentially for 1.5 years now, and the goal was to more or less complete this shift of responsibilities by the end of this year. So starting January, I consider myself to be the CSO, the Chief Strategic Officer. Dietrich is the CEO, the person who has to make sure that all in all the company is doing well. And Ulrich, you could pick whether you're a CTO, Chief Technology Officer, or the CIO, the Chief Innovation Officer. I'll leave that to you. But I think all of you will get the picture. As before, there's still everybody else at Callas Software. We happen to have not much fluctuation, so most people have been there for quite a long time. And as far as I'm observing the situation, hardly anybody is considering leaving Callas Software. It must be a relatively decent place to work. So part of the driving factor for this shift has been the idea of continuity. I think we live in a world that is changing very quickly all the time. And for example, from your point of view as a partner or as a customer, it's interesting to understand whether you're going to be around in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whether you're going to be able to expect what can be expected from a company like us, certain technology offered in a certain fashion, certain products. You want to understand whether it is fair to expect that, let's say, 3 years from now or 5 years from now, the technology we are offering today is still well supported, developed further, taking to the next step. Or whether we are going crazy in 3 years and just go away, or just sell the whole thing to somebody else who just puts a nice amount of money on the table and grabs our business. So that we try to find out how we can address that. We also, because I honestly can say that Callas is a quite nice place to work at. We wanted to keep that workplace for ourselves and for the employees. So we used quite a bit of the last 1.5 years to find out how to position the aspects inside Callas Software so that we can have our nice company that we love working for, but also how we can remain a reliable and dependable partner and vendor for the people and companies we are dealing with. So, so we just had, this year we had 2 expressions of interest in buying Callas software, and I will not disclose who that was and what the possible circumstances and terms would have been. But after a very brief discussion between Ulrich and Dietrich and myself, it was very clear for us that unless the amount of money on the table is like big, very big, like 10 or 20 times the price you would normally expect, we would not even consider entering into any discussions, because the way we do it now, we enjoy it, and we expect to continue just what we have been doing in the next, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 years, if we can. And I wanted you to know this and understand this. Some companies and people who are friends of ours have gone through an acquisition process. So there's a Berlin company called Luratech who was acquired by Foxit a while back. And they are now operating as Foxit Europe. And it's probably not bad for them, but something like that, where you kind of are merged into a larger entity, and if you're lucky, you continue to be working there. If not, you may have to look for a new job. We found it interesting, but we would think it's something that we are not keen on doing for Callas software. So that's one bit I want to put on the table. So we have a high focus, a very, very strong focus on continuity, both for ourselves and also for our customers and partners. And you should expect an operation in the years to come that reflects that. I found this, as you do when you search around for stuff like that, on the internet, and I think it quite nicely expresses how, at least I would see, how we try to ensure continuity. There are so many things that can happen that are unplanned or unexpected, and sometimes you think you can do something and then you hit a wall and you can't proceed anymore because there's this blocking wall, and then you have to find ways to work around that. That could be on the technical level, that could be on some business level. And if I look back at the last years, or maybe even at the last 20 years, this happened quite a number of times when you try to achieve something, develop something, or promote something, and then you find out it just doesn't work out yet, or it cannot be, the engineering cannot be completed because there's some stumbling block. And more often than not, I believe we have found ways around such stumbling blocks, and either cracked the wall in some other place, or dug down in the ground and appeared on the other side of the wall, or just jumped across it. A typical situation is if in support, for example, somebody's sending a bug report and they say, well, I used this feature and it appeared to be working, but when I started, let's say, actual production, high volume or more demanding jobs, I ran into some obstacles, and I can't do what I wanted to do and what I think I was right to believe I could do. And in some cases, we are able to fix this in relatively short term, but in other cases, it may be such a big problem that nobody envisioned beforehand, neither us nor the customer. We didn't fully understand what the customer was about to do. The customer didn't understand what the possible limitations might be in a certain case. And sometimes it takes longer to address such a situation. But I can tell you, we tend to work very hard, even if it takes a long time, to address such issues. So I just was talking to Peter, I don't know, this morning or last night, when he mentioned that he received a bunch of emails of bugs that have been fixed by PDF Toolbox 9.1, which we have just shipped. And he also pointed out that one of the pieces of information was a bug he reported 4 years ago. And so they don't get forgotten. It may take a while, and I hope it normally doesn't take 4 years. But we do work hard on addressing anything that might interrupt continuity for you as much as for us. Then something else. A topic that I have thought about quite a bit in the last weeks, you could label as complexity. I find it is, you always think like 10 or 20 years ago things were easier and nicer and the world was so much more friendly towards us and everything. Of course, this is not true. At any time you have probably a decent amount of challenges and complexity and problems and what have you. But still at the same time, I believe because of all the technology developments that are happening and the way how we have to interact with them, create a new level of complexity. So just to point at one bit from a user point of view, I've been a user of Adobe InDesign since before it actually shipped. So I was at the first boot camp for developers in 1999. So I've been using InDesign for a long time. And as you all know, products like InDesign are now part of what Adobe calls Creative Cloud. In the years 2000 and 2005, you could follow what was happening with the product, like there were new releases every year, every 2 years, every 18 months, and it had a set of new features. You familiarized yourself with the new features, you started using some of them, you became an expert in using some of these features and so on. And nowadays, we have a situation where InDesign, as part of the Creative Cloud, may sometimes even silently release a new feature or new functionality every 3 months. I'm still on the pre-release program for InDesign. I'm not spending as much time anymore as in the past actually trying to learn things about what's new. But it could happen that you start your computer again, some update is happening, and something changes in your UI, you have a new feature, you don't even know it's a new feature, you don't recognize it of what it is, and so on. And even if you try to stay up to date by reading revision histories and news announcements and so on, it's becoming much more difficult. And InDesign, for those of you who are even using it, is just one tiny piece of what is going on. And you have many other applications. You have your operating systems, you have your hardware, you have services in the internet, and many of these interact with each other. And you never know whether the interaction between services or tools is going to continue to work tomorrow or next week, and planning becomes so much more complicated. So sometimes it feels like looking at the world through a kaleidoscope, and so each time you turn your kaleidoscope just a tiny bit, it's completely different. And while a kaleidoscope visually can be quite appealing, so I find these, of course I've stolen this somewhere, I find it quite appealing. It's very difficult to find structure and to know what has just happened, what's going to happen, where you are now, and so on. So it's really a major challenge. It's also a major challenge for us internally as we are developing new features, new technologies. Just as an example, running in the cloud is of course a big topic. It's not that everybody's already doing it, but it's becoming very clear that it's going to be an important part of the orchestration of using software. And then you start looking at it, and like a year or two ago, it was just smart to think of a virtual machine running on Amazon cloud. And then you find out that you run into new types of problems. So what if you need a lot of processing capacity today, but only a little bit tomorrow, and then much more again on the day after? So you run into new concepts that aren't actually that new, because I've just learned they have been around for a while, they have just gone unnoticed for a long time. Then you run into on-demand deployment of instances of things that do something, like the Docker architecture, where software is just launching and ending and working on an as-needed basis, and you have an infrastructure to orchestrate the whole thing. And you start looking at it, and then you find new classes of problems. And I could continue describing this for a while. So there's some complexity that we run into because we want to be able to provide the functionality of PDF Toolbox or the PDFA pilot, or maybe from axaio, made to print, or other tools, in a fashion that you could use it in a Docker environment. And also we believe that on one side, of course, we have to get to grips with that complexity on our end to know what we actually want, to decide what may be good enough for the next 5 years. Who knows whether Docker is around in 5 years, or whether the next big thing just happened. And also, we strive to reduce the complexity you may run into if you start using our offerings in such a context. I had this, I'm in the middle of this complexity challenge regarding what I will talk a little bit more in the session around analytics in a pre-fight world. To analyze a large amount of data of things happening in the processing environment. And we started a project around PDF Toolbox logging or PDF Toolbox analytics a while back, started talking about it early summer in the Drupa. And I'm finding that what I originally thought we would end up doing is not what we are doing at this time, and I'm not even sure what we are going to end up doing once we start shipping something in this field. And it moved from complex analysis of timing during processing, it moved towards monitoring what's going on in production. We run into the challenge that PDF Toolbox hardly ever is the only piece of process or software running in a given environment. So there's a need of logging and analyzing other data, and then there might be the need to log everything together. And there are actually tools out there that you can use, and you start using the tools, and then you find out they have their own complexity. And so you really jump from one challenge of complexity to the next one. That much said, we will continue to attack these challenges, and we will also continue, or we aim to continue, to only confront you with an amount of complexity that cannot be avoided, because sometimes you have to get to grips yourself with some of that if you want to do analytics, or if you want to deploy software in a distributed self-orchestrating environment. There's a couple of concepts you have to understand, and a couple of decisions to make based on that, maybe a couple of investments to have, and train people in such your own organization to be able to deal with that. But anyway, we aim to make it as easy or as manageable for you as we can. This is also true for one area that is relatively new in PDF Toolbox. You can not only use variables in PDF Toolbox, you can now also use scripting, JavaScript-based scripting, when doing something with variables. And I have to admit, we are still finding out new things every other day or week that we didn't think about when we implemented the whole thing, because it's so powerful and so flexible that you really can get lost in the many things you can do. So it's not that we always, on the day we ship something, we give you a complete package of the functionality and then tutorials or guidance, what you can do and how to go about it. We ourselves are even learning while we interact with our own software. We continue to improve the software. There have been a couple of major enhancements for JavaScript support in variables in PDF Toolbox, in PDF Toolbox 9.1, because we learned that there's certain things you would want to be able to do, but you can't do just yet, and there's only small bits missing, and we're going to just add them in some next release, and then try to get to grips with it ourselves, and then also help you get to grips with that. A good strategy from your point of view would be to digest as much related information about such complex things as you can. You're showing that you're heading in the right direction by being here. That's a very good thing, because we will be able to explain a couple of relatively complex functionalities to you today and tomorrow. And there's also a couple of other opportunities that I will briefly talk about in just a few minutes. So, while I will not do the full history tour this time as I did last year, I will still look back at this year for a little. The major items, as I remember them, and there's so many things happening that sometimes you tend to forget, have been the 5 listed here. Drupal, PDF camps, the release of PDF Toolbox version 9, and then the update last week to 9.1, PDF chip, update 1.2. And a topic that may surprise some of you, but it is very important to us, especially at this time. Drupal. Who has been at Drupal? Okay, most people have been. Good. Who thought it was a good Drupal? Okay, now I'm curious. Can you just mention 2 or 3 things that made you believe it was not a good Drupal? Food too expensive?
It was an okay Drupal, it was nothing special. I
Okay.
didn't say that it was a bad Drupal.
Okay.
The question was it a good Drupal?
Okay, good, yeah. Accepted. Any other thoughts?
There were not really revolutionary inventions.
Okay, nothing revolutionary. Good. No big splash items. Okay. So if you look carefully, this is a letter from 1951, because that's the year the first Drupal happened. I had to look it up myself. And so it says Drupal on the stamp, and that was the posters that they had to advertise Drupal. It was actually pretty successful. So I think it was almost 200,000 people attending Drupal in 1951 on a space that was, I believe, was a fifth of the current space. So the show was smaller, there was a lot of people. And this year I think we had like 350,000 people, not even double that number. So I found this very interesting, because it's 1951, just 6 years after the war, and almost 200,000 people at the first instance of that trade show around printing, hungry for business, I guess. So for us, and I think this is true for Peas and for Callas and axaio as well. Before Drupal, we were not quite sure whether it would turn out well or not. Yeah, we are all observing a decline of certain business segments when it comes to the printing industry. That's for sure. So publication printing or commercial printing, at least in the mainstream part, is not the most rewarding business at this time. And of course we all know there's a lot of digital things happening. Inkjet printing is big and so on, but it really was not clear whether Drupal 2016 would be a very active and well-attended show, highlighting the interesting recent developments and not suffering too much from the lack of some of the old business, or not. And so what do you do? What kind of booth do you book? How many people do you send? Because Drupal is still long with 11 days. How much do you invest in trying to pull people to Drupal? Because it's always a major effort. And we were, Tom, am I right? We were relatively unsure how much of a success or failure it might be, also in terms of being there with a certain booth and staff and everything, and then nobody's showing up because nobody cares anymore about printing. And fortunately, we had a luxury problem, I think, because the booth was too small. So we booked a a decent booth, but not the biggest one. Actually, 4Ps booked the booth, not Callas Software. So they took the financial risk for that as well. And I think we've been very busy almost all of the time during Drupa, and so that was very good to see. It was very good to see for me at least, and I think Tom was also relatively happy about that. So in terms of potential, it was definitely good, I would say. And Tom will inform at least me whether the potential materialized into money-related transactions. But anyway, I think, and also walking around some of the other halls, I think it was quite a busy trade show. It was definitely not a failure. For some people, it was an okay trade show. For me, it was a relief to see that it still seems to be healthy, the whole thing, like the printing industry at large. And of course, it's confusing to see that Messe Düsseldorf is struggling. So they wanted to have the next Drupa 2019, breaking with the pattern they had so far at Drupa every 4 years, and then I think a lot of vendors complained, and they just shifted. I think still during Drupa back to the 4-year cycle. So the next Drupa is planned for 2020. It will probably be a much warmer Drupa than in previous years because it's a few weeks later. So it's not end of May or early June. I think it's late June and early July. So that will be fun in the big halls at Messe Düsseldorf. So come in t-shirts maybe. I also wanted to briefly talk about PDF Camp. We had a number of events, not the VIP or partner events that we have every October, November, but a different type of event. The first ones we called Hackathon. Actually, the first one was PDF Chip Hackathon because PDF Chip was brand new at that time. And then we learned that maybe a few people get scared by Hackathon because it's too geeky, and we ended up calling it PDF Camp for the last event. And it's really, it's a 2-day event. It's a hands-on event. So if you don't bring your computer and if you are not inclined to interact with software or with programming environments or shell scripts or text editors or configuration editors or whatever, you may be in the wrong place. But if you're working on problems that have to do with PDF, where our technology or even other technologies might be important, maybe you're in the middle of a project or you're planning a new project, you have a certain class of problems to solve in your production, or you have to do the same for your customers because you're the integration partner. And the problem is not really solved yet, so it's not clear exactly what's the best way to go about it. PDF Camp is probably a good place to be. The setup is as follows for those who haven't been at any of the PDF camps. So in terms of size, we had like 25 people attending, and then staff from 4Ps and Callas. So about 8 people, including developers, including product managers, including Dietrich, Ulrich, and myself. David was always around, and so that means you have a high likelihood of finding out even lesser known details about the products than otherwise. Of course, you can always look at the documentation or you can ask support, but sitting together looking at a problem or at a project, both the folks who have the problem and then people from our side can generate quite interesting insights. The event always lasts 2 days. It starts by a brainstorming session to find out what interesting topics are. So far we have been able more or less each time to form groups of 5, 6, 7 people who would work on a specific problem or set of problems, and then you just keep working on this for 2 days. And at least I would say at least the majority of attendees have been very happy to have been there because they were able to understand the options they have much better for solving a certain problem or addressing a certain project. And it has saved them so much time and other resources in the project work that it was well worthwhile going to this event for the 2 days. In terms of cost, we do charge for it, but mostly to make sure that you do show up, not because we are desperate for the money. So the fee has been, I think, 150 euros this previous event. And we try to make sure we have a decent environment, a big room. So this time it was in September, right? Yeah. Feels like a long time ago already. It was actually a concert hall, a mini concert hall of almost 200 square meters. So we had a stage and everything. We would have been able to sing songs and everything, but we didn't. David may be doing dancing and singing next time. So it was a very worthwhile event, and we will continue this event, probably have at least 2 such PDF Camp events every year for the foreseeable future. We had some problem, I wouldn't call it problem, but let's say a small challenge in terms of language. So the last one was in Berlin, and it was announced as a German language event. Still, I think we had like 6 or 7 people who didn't speak a word of German beyond beer and hello. And of course we could manage because at least people from our team can easily switch from English to German and then back and so on. But of course communication is easier if everybody can just easily speak or understand. And so we decided to have one event focused on English, so anybody can of course come, even if you're not a native English speaker. And then one other event that will nominally be German. If you don't speak any German, you're absolutely welcome, but please don't complain that a lot of people are speaking German all the time. And the next one will be in I think March 27, 28. I will look it up. Again in Berlin, it's nominally an English-speaking event, 2 days PDF camp with a focus on English language. So it will be easy for anybody who's non-German speaker to attend that and take full advantage of that. One other effect of these PDF camps is also that not only do attendees learn a lot, it's very clear for me that we as Callas Software and 4Ps and also axaio, we do learn at least as much as those who are coming, because we get a better understanding of how you use our software. Normally we only get like support inquiries, and so we get only the unfortunate moments of deploying the software. But it's also important for us to understand how you would normally go about using the software, how you are integrating it, what's important, what's not so important, what your main goals are, how you do the whole thing. So that makes it easier for us to design updated functionality or invent new functionality. And also in discussing, we may find completely new ways of doing things that neither you as an attendee nor we as the developer would have thought about otherwise. So it's very important of exchanging ideas and for us also learning how you are using the products. Also very important this year has been the release of a few updates. We released PDF Toolbox 9 around Drupal, and I think you have probably heard about it quite a bit. You will learn a bit more during the 2 days here. And the Toolbox 9 release was followed just last week by the update to PDF Toolbox 9.1. Already at Drupal, when discussing PDF Toolbox 9 features with customers to whom we demoed the features, and also in the weeks thereafter, it of course became clear that we came up with some extremely cool features, but there was also still space for improvement here and there. Things that either we haven't thought about, or things we just failed to complete in time for the PDF Toolbox 9 release. And I think we made good use of our time between Drupal and end of October effectively to fill the gaps and to extend a lot, especially of the new functionality, in quite interesting ways. And that is also going to be a major focus during the sessions today and tomorrow to explain you what we did, how we did it, and why it may be interesting for you. We also last week updated PDF chip. Who of you has used PDF chip in some way, played around with it, did a project? Okay, that group has to grow. For those of you who are not quite sure what PDF chip is, PDF chip lets you take an HTML file and turn it into PDF. And the difference between doing command print in a browser and saving out as a PDF file and PDF chip is that you have an extreme degree of control over what's happening, especially from a prepress point of view. So you can use spot colors, and you can address transparency, and you can set your page geometry boxes, and you can do a number of other things. So it's not quite the same as just doing a command print and save as PDF in the Safari browser on Mac. We haven't updated PDF chip in quite a while. I think more or less a year ago the last official update had been shipped. And in the meantime, in the last 12 months, we have invested quite a bit of engineering to either improve existing features or add completely new features. One area, for example, was that we already had support for barcodes, for over 100 types of barcodes, essentially from day one, from PDF chip 1.0. But based on feedback in some projects, we understood that we also need to provide a number of additional parameters. And so we had an inquiry earlier this year about Deutsche Post DP matrix codes, a very special type of matrix codes. And there were a couple of parameters that technically we do support, but we didn't expose the support for the necessary settings in PDF chip so far. So we added that, and there was a list of, I think, 150 sub-parameters, and we just decided to fully implement these. So we believe that PDF chip is now one of the tools with the most complete support for barcodes and any special varieties of such barcodes that may exist, going all the way down to Australian postcode and some Korean special codes and what have you. We also invested a lot in PDF chip and also in PDF Toolbox, as you will learn today and tomorrow, in helping you with, while you are developing your solution, by adding a number of what you could call debugging features. And I think that should be of interest, especially to those who spend a lot of time fine-tuning their process plans and PDF chip templates and what have you. Documentation. So that's the one thing engineers always try to avoid. I have to admit that during the last 2-3 years we didn't invest as much energy in documenting our products as we should have, and we are in the process of fixing that. It's actually a process we started in around March this year in preparation for the PDF Toolbox 9 release. We're going to continue that focused effort probably until end of Q1 next year. The main the main insight that was driving this activity was that in some cases we realized it is almost impossible for a partner or customer to find out a certain functionality or feature or setting or parameter without asking. So discoverability has suffered quite a bit. And unless you are very close to Callas software and you're in touch anyway every other week, it would become unlikely that you could take advantage of certain extremely cool feature or technology. And of course, this is not a good thing. We decided to address that. And it's actually been one of the strategic projects, if you want to call it that, that I have taken care of in the last months and will continue to take care of until we are done, probably by end of Q1 2017. So just one sign of this is you should now be able to find pretty decent online documentation about PDF Toolbox and PDF Chip. If you go to the Callas website, it's now saying more clearly in a couple of places online documentation, and you will find documentation that I believe is much more useful than a lot of things you were able to find until just now. We would love to hear from you, so please check it out. It's really important that you check it out because we really try to make it in a way that you can immediately use it for whatever you're doing with that feature. Let us know if you're doing a good job, where we need to improve, what's missing, and so on. So these were kind of a couple of items that, from my point of view, were quite important for 2016 so far. We still have almost 2 months to go, but so what next? What's cooking? Just need to make sure I don't use too much time. There's a couple of domains that keep us busy. Some of them are not exactly new. I do know that I mentioned something like cloud, at least the previous partner event and the event before. It's something where we are not in a position yet to say we have the complete, perfect solution. We do know that you and anybody using our technology will expect sooner or later certain options that are not readily available today. And we are working hard to make some progress here. We don't expect that we will complete that in the next 1 or 2 or 3 months. It will probably be an ongoing process for quite a while. But just to give you an example by what I mean here is, I was already pointing to cloud and software as a service and software on demand and so on. But we now have inquiries where people use Docker or similar frameworks, where software is launched as needed. So if the system finds out I need more processing, it just launches more instances of whatever tool or feature is available. So in the case of PDF Toolbox, if more files arrive and you have the goal to process them as soon as you can, more instances of PDF Toolbox should get launched. And it's not just instances you can run on one virtual or physical machine. It's like as many instances as you may need. And that could easily be in some environments the equivalent of 100 computers. So let's say a 4-core machine, you could run 4 PDF Toolbox processes, so it would be 400 instances of PDF Toolbox. But it could also be that 10 minutes later, there's only 1 or 2 instances running, because that's all that's needed in that moment. At this time, we might be able to serve you on a technical level, in principle at least, because it's not rocket science to develop a Docker container, put PDF Toolbox inside, and just make it happen, so to speak. But I have to admit that one issue is how to handle licensing. The obvious solution is to just develop a licensing server, some extra piece of software that just keeps track of what's going on and then does the math and charges you. But again, you're looking at a number of complexities, and there is it again, complexity. We have customers who run in a completely private cloud, locked against everything outside, like at a bank or insurance company. So how useful is a license server that sits in the middle and that is not able to call home and send information about how much PDF Toolbox has been used? It could be easier if you're running in the Amazon cloud, but still, then there are some customers who would be scared if the software calls home. It would be technically easy, just send reports every month and then we charge you. But in some cases, it's absolutely not desired that that should ever happen. So what now? And it's that kind of challenges that we are trying to address. We think we will be able to address this in due course and be able to maybe at some future event explain you how we do it and why it will work well, because what we are seeing is, just talk to a friend who's running a software company. They also have a kind of license server, and they have 5 times as many support calls for the license server than for the actual software. That's what we don't want. Yeah? So we don't want to punish our loyal customers and honest customers, and that's not the way it should be. So it's a big challenge. I think we will come up with something. Maybe at the next VIP event we can present something or announce something. I don't know. There's also an area that's becoming quite urgent, even in some cases, what I would call ever more intelligent pre-flighting. Just to give you one example of what this implies is, if you are in the field of label printing, and you have like an imposed sheet of 15 labels sitting all over the place, and you want to do some last pre-flight check for embedded fonts and text size and use of colors, but you only care about such aspects inside the actual label. And in many cases you will be able to identify the area for the label by a cut line that very often travels with the production file. So a line that's saying, well, once the label has been printed, it will be cut here and then will actually be used. So the information seems to be there, but so far we only allow you to limit checking against a rectangle. Yeah, you can say only check items inside the trim box. We could take this further and say only check items inside a custom box on the page. But we are not there yet to say, well, only check items that are inside a cut line. And in principle, it's not that difficult to implement that. What the challenge is that it works reasonably fast on an imposed sheet with 100,000 objects that overlap in all kinds of ways. So that's one other area. We're doing some research how to address that. And it's only just one example, so there's many more aspects and bits and pieces to take pre-flighting further. I also already mentioned logging or analytics, logging production data while using PDF Toolbox or PDFA Pilot or PDF chip, and then aggregating that into some system, and then trying to be able to find out what has happened, or monitoring what is currently happening, or do a post-mortem, try to find out why a certain thing went wrong and what file it was or what document and how the processing was done and so on. And last but not least, this is of course the evergreen, my personal favorite pet project, barcodes. I thought I should be done after a year or two looking at barcodes, and then I should be able to fully understand what they are, how they can be used, guidelines for using them. And the only thing that has happened so far, there's more and more where I do know that I don't know it yet. So the more you begin to understand, the more you understand what you don't know. And we're doing all kinds of mini projects. So one has been that recently I've been in touch with a company printing on textile. So for, is that Gardinen of English? Curtains. Curtains, yeah. So for curtains or decoration or whatever. And they tend to print barcodes on the printed pieces so they can identify them later on because they have to go through some post-processing. And the company I was dealing with didn't have much understanding of barcodes, and so they had to make the barcodes very big so that they could actually be read, where technically it should be possible to make them relatively small if you get them right. And it was an interesting exercise to find out what parameters are critical for determining the best settings for codes, barcodes or matrix codes, and how small you can get. And so far we have found out that you don't have to have a 15 centimeter long barcode to encode 10 characters or digits. You could also end up with the 2x2 or 3x3 centimeters matrix code achieving the same effect. And some matrix codes are more robust than others, and a lot of things that are very interesting. And each time you look at a certain type of project or environment, there will be each time slightly different challenges. So one challenge that hasn't been solved so far, neither by us nor by other people in the field, is printing barcodes or 2D codes on brown corrugated. That's just a big challenge because the brown is always too dark. But it would be very important for certain people to be able to just put a black barcode or 2D code on brown corrugated without having to paint it white beforehand or put some brighter surface on it before printing on it. So again, a lot of things happening in this field. If all goes, so at the moment, FOBRA, the Graphic Industry Research Institute in Munich, is going to apply for a research project around barcodes and 2D codes, and I'm expecting a lot to come out of that should it go through. If it needs funding from federal government in this case in Germany, because otherwise it will be very difficult to finance, but that should bring a couple of interested people and companies together to work on this topic. So that is my keynote or first presentation of the day. Thank you for listening. I hope you will be able to learn a few things about our companies and our products and technologies. I hope you will be able to enjoy the rest of the event. Personally, I think there's actually sessions I'm sad I'm going to miss them because I have to run my own session. So it should be quite interesting. And anything you need to know to understand, you need in whatever fashion, just talk to us. You have seen the people in the room who are from Callas, 4Ps, Axaio, and the other vendors. So this is a good opportunity to talk. Thank you very much.